Welcome to Friday 15 with Master B2B. My name is Brian Beck. I'm here with Andy Hoare for another week of fun and exciting conversation all about B2B e-commerce. Andy, welcome to Friday, middle of football season, exciting times. What say you?
Yeah, got a big game. Northwestern is playing Oregon tomorrow at the Beach Bowl, and we were just joking. Do we know if Northwestern will keep them under 80 for the game? We'll see.
Man, that's rough. Well, my team is Rutgers, as many of you know, and I'm a New Jersey guy originally. And Rutgers, we've got our last out of conference game this weekend, so we got one more win to make, hopefully, and then we're off to get slaughtered by Ohio State and Oregon and Michigan and Penn State. Actually, I don't think we have Michigan this year, but yeah, we've got to we play the top three of the top 5 teams in the United States in college football. It's a tough conference. I don't know, man. We'll see. I'm rooting for it. Anyhow, well, everyone, welcome again to Friday 15. We got an exciting topic we're going to be talking about today. We'll get to that in just a minute. But before we do that, let's go to our breaking news. Here we go. Wall Street Journal. Andy, did you see this? There is now clear evidence AI is wrecking young Americans' job prospects. Young workers are getting hit in fields where generative AI tools can most easily automate tasks done by humans, such as software development, making this one of the clearest indicators yet of AI's disruptive impact. This report, Andy, it was extensive. It looked at a lot of different jobs and categories. It was thousands. I can't recall who did the research here. You probably know, but
Eric Nielsen, from Stanford.
That's right. It was Stanford. That's right. And it's fascinating. I mean, this is a real thing. Again, I have a son he's just entered high school, so we're thinking, my goodness, what are we going to do career-wise with him? Because I guess he can't do software development anymore. Strike that one off the list. What's your thoughts on this update?
Yeah, what's interesting about this is they actually used ADP data, and they matched it up with government data, and so it wasn't speculative. I mean, they were able to use regression analysis to establish what was happening here. But what they discovered that was kind of fascinating is it wasn't categories that were losing jobs. Not like everybody in computer science was losing a job, or everybody in customer service was losing a job. They showed it by age cohorts, and what they showed was that the younger people in customer service, the younger people in computer science were losing their jobs. The older people in both groups were actually not, at least not yet.
Interesting.
And so it does kind of beg the question, why are the younger cohorts losing to AI? And I think there's almost really Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is either you're training AI or you're not. Mm-hmm. And I think more experienced, more mature, older people have something to train AI to do. They know the business processes, they have institutional knowledge, et cetera. If you put it in those terms, what do young people bring to the table that AI doesn't already have? And I think the answer is not much.
Wow. That's pretty sad, Andy.
They have other skills. They have other skills, but training AI in business processes, not one of them.
Well, yeah, you're right, because you're taking that. I mean, AI's promise is taking some of those tasks that and transferring them into an automated process that can replicate what you typically give a junior level employee to do, whether that's outreach for a sales process, or writing maybe a paper for marketing and doing research around it, or writing code. Right? These are things that AI can be trained to do, but we're living this, Andy, in our own, as we're looking at our own AI rollout for Master B2B, and we're learning firsthand what it takes. And it does take a lot of industry expertise to get it to do something that you need it to do that's smart, that's not going to hallucinate, that's going to make an accurate, recommendation, connection, what have you. So yeah, we're learning, quote unquote, the hard way, that there's a lot to do here.
Yeah, and it's all based on use cases. And a lot of times those use cases are only known to people internal to the organization, because it's very tactical stuff, like moving this to there or changing this. And so maybe you saw the other article that came out a couple of days ago in the Wall Street Journal about how the consulting industry is changing radically. And it used to be that pyramid model. Remember, at the top, you had like a senior partner, And as you
Yep.
got down, there were more junior people, and they did percent of billable hours, etc.
Yep.
Well, it's turning out somebody had replaced that image with like an obelisk that looks more like the Washington Monument, and saying that at the lower level where you used to have all these junior people fresh out of business school who would do all this analysis, that doesn't
Hmm.
exist anymore. But the really interesting insight was what they found. People who have completed AI projects, and again, we're still early in this, so it could still change, but people have completed AI projects using the McKinseys and the Bains and the BCGs of the world
Right.
are now reporting back that they're basically wasting money.
Wow.
And one guy was quoted as saying, "We spent $20 million." And he said, "We
Whew.
didn't get anywhere. I think I could have hired a bunch of college kids who would have done the same thing," because there are no AI experts. That's
Yeah.
the point. Not
Right.
least of which are, a 60-year-old senior partner at McKinsey. What qualifies this person to know a lot about something that's changing in real time that he or she's never used before, him or herself, right? So,
Hmm.
uh, yeah, I guess beware when it comes to
Right.
that. I think at the end of the
Yep.
day, you have to do this stuff yourself, maybe with an outside partner, but you got to drive this AI
Well,
transformation yourself.
right. It's a brave new world. I mean, to me, this is almost an entrepreneurial. It's exciting in a lot of ways. Really, it's a, what can you do with this tool as an entrepreneur? I think about it, as hey, what can we be doing with this? But yeah, it's about getting in and doing it and learning from it and not theorizing about it, but actually getting in and deploying it. And that's what we're doing. And we are learning a lot. So, all right, we got to get to our topic today, and because it's related to all of this, and it has to do with technology. Our topic is: has composable commerce has the approach run its course? Wow, is it still relevant? Is the question. There's this thing called the Mock Alliance, Andy, which you're an expert in this. You're deeper than I am in all these platforms and composable approaches, etc. So I want to get your take on this and define it for us. But what this Mock Alliance said, which is a group of composable commerce technologies, said that 87% of organizations, B2B and B2C, have implemented or at least partially implemented composable technologies, and 90% of them meet or exceed ROI goals. So there's this thing came on the scene, composable commerce, about 5-6 years ago, Andy, and you had organizations like the Mock Alliance, which is again a group of technology companies, and there's a lot of buzz around it. A lot of companies looked at it. Some of the data that I just shared, says that companies used it or have used it or are using it. Can you define composable for our listeners in case they don't know what it is, and kind of why is it? What was the promise of it? Why was it so impactful in the industry, or why has it been?
Yeah, so there are so many, definitions of it. And one interesting thing is everybody thinks the C in mock stands for composable. Doesn't it? Stands for cloud first. So composable was even kind of newish to the mock. The mock
Sure.
predated that to some extent, but
Interesting.
everybody's kind of a different definition of it. My definition of it is something that is basically the ultimate in flexibility. That I use the analogy of, instead of buying a car that is fully, built with, it's got a stereo system built into it, safety features, etc. It's like
Yeah.
buying a kit car. My dad was a car enthusiast, and he always wanted to have a kit car. He wanted to have something shipped to him by mail that he would assemble on his own. Literally, every piece had to be assembled. That was supposed to be the fun of it all. Composable is more like that, where you've got to kind of assemble everything. But what's happened in this space is, uh, the composable thing was kind of a rejection of the idea of a monolith or a non-composable, where everything was pre-built and you got what came out of the box and you were limited by that. So
Hmm.
people said, wouldn't it be great if we had a framework where you could
Yeah.
just grab the best of the best, bring it all together? So companies like Commerce Tools went to market with a
Yeah.
framework where you
Yeah.
could bring in the best of breed. But what ended up happening was reality set in, and not we could have a whole debate about who's to blame for this and where it actually went, but with too many companies, the IT groups in particular at large enterprises fell in love with the idea of composable, is because they said, oh, now we can build it. Well, the
Right.
problem is, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. And what ended up, I think, happening was people had some really bad experiences, uh, trying to build this thing from scratch. It became too customized. It took too
Mm.
long. It was too expensive, et cetera. And we heard all of this happening. Now, there were some very successful composable implementations, but there were also some unsuccessful ones. And I found that when it comes to the rhetoric in this space, anything times zero usually equals zero. So the bad experiences around Composable have now influenced even the good experiences around Composable. And we know this because the companies that go to market as Composable are now building in significant capabilities that are pre-built. I think
Right.
that's the next slide.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've got companies like Commerce Tools and VTEX and others that have introduced full stack like capabilities. And look, Andy, I spent a long time as a practitioner, deploying, I replatformed many times in my career and have helped companies over, as you have over the years, with selecting platforms. And it's this whole, to your point about the promise of this. I mean, I always wanted more flexibility in our platform because I would be beholden to the IT team. I'd be, if I wanted to change something on a platform, it was a multi-month, significant project just to introduce a feature. So this, from a business user perspective, this also had a lot of appeal. But the challenge, of course, is, in this model with all this flexibility, is that it's almost in some ways like starting from scratch, right? So now am I more reliant on my IT team to do things because I have to kind of build it. It's a framework. So you see companies like Commerce Tools rolled out front end experience tools, adding a head, really, it's in a lot of ways. Head meaning, we talk about headless as another sort of quote unquote term for composable, meaning, hey, there's no front end on it. You can build your own. You can use anything you want. Well, Commerce Tools rolled out some capabilities there. VTEX rolled out some native, support for ordering, reordering, role-based views, quotes, saved carts. These are things that would typically be in a full stack or, quote unquote monolith type solution. So, I mean, the question is, as we look at these numbers on the, that I cited earlier in this last slide, 87% of organizations are implementing or have implemented Composable. 90% are meeting or exceeding ROI goals. Are they actually doing a Composable, type approach? Are the additions of these full stack components the reason that Composable is reporting it's successful? Is this even composable, right? What are your thoughts, Andy?
Well, like Commerce Tools, for the longest time they said, hey, we don't really have a CMS. We don't have a front end. And then they bought a company called Frontastic, and then they rolled out something called Front End. I mean, you can't be any less explicit than that, which created that head. And I'm like, wait a minute, a headless head company or a headless company? I mean,
Right.
but it's again, it's not for everybody. I mean, there's still like large enterprises that are more digitally mature. They need more flexibility. For them, they still like the best of breed approach. They like not having the head. But by virtue of the fact that Commerce Tools rolled out the head, it does tell you that more and more companies are like, well, we'll take a native approach to this. We don't need the best of breed. There's a lot of complexity about integrating that. Maybe it's good enough. And VTEX actually left the Mock Alliance over problems they raised
That's right.
around
Yeah.
Composable. And so the point of that was when they joined, they thought it was one thing, and partly as a PR stunt, but partly there's some reality to this. They said, but it turned out that the SIs were really falling in love with Composable. Why? Because they can do a
More work.
lot of custom work.
Yes.
And they said that it kind of betrayed the original idea. Now that's a whole other discussion, which we've had.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that Composable is changing at this point, and that the pre-built model is
Right.
making a bit of a comeback here because Composable is turning out to be a little more difficult and time consuming in certain use cases than people had originally anticipated.
Right. Well, I mean, the question is true composable, meaning this pure toolkit run its course? It's not really the model that works. In other words, there really needs to be some full stack components. I think what companies have found maybe is that it provides too much flexibility to business users, that it is, complex to implement. You need to have capabilities. Is it, maybe it's too expensive, maybe it takes too long. Ultimately, I used to make this argument all the time when I was in a VP of ecom role that, hey, listen, a company, CEO, we're not a software company. We don't need to be managing and owning and developing code ourselves. We're a product company. We sell products to end users. We sell products to, B2B customers and consumers that use these products in their work and lives. And that's what we need to be best in the world at, not creating software. So does this push, this composable, one of the reasons it's had challenges is it push it. Do you think, Andy, I'm curious your opinion, does it push, companies to really become software companies, and that's not their core competency? What are your thoughts?
Well, there's always been this debate over what should you actually do yourself versus the build versus buy thing.
Right.
And I've often said that companies should be using their precious IT resources to do things only that precious IT resource can do.
Mhm.
And is it really the case that at a distributor or a manufacturer, but let's take a distributor that, is a HVAC distributor that has a team of IT professionals, that they should really be building essentially stuff that you can buy off the shelf, or
Right.
writing custom code to connect systems that other people have already found a way to connect? Or should they be doing stuff that only they can do? And I think that's where this debate gets kind of murky, because there are certain use cases where you do need the flexibility and you do want the ability to connect these systems yourself. But again, back to my kit car analogy, do you really need to build the engine, or can you just buy the engine and then build the rest of the car? I mean, I think this is the question at
Okay.
hand.
Well, then, Mr. Hoare, explain Granger. They built their own platform, right? Zorro,
Well,
I think.
no, not really. I mean,
No.
yeah, I mean, globally, they have traditionally used Hybris, which is SAP Commerce. And yes, they've customized parts of it, but I'm not sure I would characterize it as a composable.
Okay.
It's hard to say. It depends, you'd have to
Well, even just developing, right? I mean, in terms of the core capabilities, maybe Granger's not a good example then, Andy. Are there other examples of large B2B companies? Think of some of the other big industrial distributors or in healthcare or whatever. Are there large distributors that have built their own platforms, or are they? When you look at those numbers and you look at built with data and other things, you see in-house is still a very significant component of the
well,
overall sort of platform landscape, right?
I don't think that's a great idea either. I don't think building your own system internally, but there's a spectrum here, right? There's
Yeah.
build your own system internally from scratch using open source software, whatever. There are very, very, very specific use cases where that makes sense, but very few. And I think IT teams overestimate
Well,
their ability to do that. So there's that extreme. The other
agree
extreme is
there.
you just take a Shopify like thing with a bunch of templates and go for it. Um, Commerce Tools is maybe closer to the one end where it's more it's more customized in a way.
Hmm.
It's more kit car ish. I'm not an advocate of building something yourself. I have heard people talk about this. Again, there are maybe a couple of use cases for that, but not for a large company.
Yeah.
That just doesn't make any sense to me, because again, back to what we just talked about 5 minutes ago, you're going to use your precious internal resources to recreate the wheel that's already been created. And by the way, once you create this thing yourself, you got to maintain it and you've got to
Yeah.
update it. And there are professional companies that do that. I mean, that's their job. Every year they've got to come up with new features, et cetera. Are you going to have your team
Yeah.
try and compete with these large
That's right.
multi-billion dollar companies? I mean,
Yeah, and that's exactly right, Andy. I think the true answer here is a bit of a blend, and I think we're just sort of what I think we're doing here is modifying the definition of what composable means. It's a balance between flexibility and providing common out of the box components of a full stack solution to accelerate what's what the most common. I mean, look, if you look at B2B, there are a series, regardless of industry, there are a series of common functionalities you need, right? And those can be accommodated. Now, where does it become bespoke and you can create competitive advantage by creating specific functionalities? That's where the special sauce is, I think. So defining the edge of that, and I think to some degree it's going to vary by industry group too. Some industries are more standardized. If you look at, why is Shopify taking so much share in the consumer marketplace? Well, if you're selling apparel, really the differentiation, the experience you're delivering, if you're selling apparel via e-commerce, it's really about the product and what you do on top of the platform with creative assets and video and interactive immersive experiences and things like that. But the core shopping capabilities why am I paying all this money to other platforms when I can just go on Shopify and get all the common elements I need, right? So
Or enough
that's
of it, right? You can
enough
get
of it.
close
Yeah,
enough. You're not gonna
enough of it.
differentiate with that last
Well,
20%
that's
that
it.
Shopify can't do, but in B2B, that last 20% could be what actually different
Yes,
it could be your integration with your supply chain, the
could be,
fulfillment part. It
could
could
be.
be your
Yep,
pricing model. These
yep.
are all things that you do need this capability, and so what we've seen is that, like most things, it's not thesis, antithesis, it's synthesis, and we're going
Right.
to see more platforms that have the flexibility of a composable, but with
Yep. Yep.
some pre-built capabilities. The question is, are they going to come from the all-in-one end of the spectrum and come over, or are they going to come
Or
from the
yeah, that's
composable and
going to
move
be
on?
interesting to see.
One
So
of them
here's
will
what.
win. It's going to be a VHS versus Betamax thing.
Right.
One of them will win, but
I like what Tim had to say about this. Tim is the former director of e-commerce at Beacon Building Products and QXO, two different companies. And he's deployed this. He says, I've deployed Composable in two different organizations. If the internal team does not grasp the concept of composability or have a sound architectural approach, this is a major risk, and it would not recommend moving forward with a composable system. Thank you, Tim, for that. That's amen. That's exactly right. I think you need to have those capabilities internally. We asked our audience also, Andy, what they
well,
thought.
before you go there, there was one thing that I read. There was a couple of comments from the LinkedIn poll that
Yeah,
I thought was kind of interesting. One point that a couple of people made is that you do need to convince and you need to make the argument to the senior team about why flexibility that comes with composability matters.
right.
And if they aren't on board with that, if they don't understand that idea, to Tim's point, you're going to run into a lot of problems because if you say we need the flexibility to do A, B, C, D, and E, and then when the bill comes in or the time estimates come in and they
Right.
go, well, I was for flexibility, but not at that
Not at
price.
that price.
But if you can say, look, that price and that time frame is going to give us something that's substantially better
Yep.
than anybody else in the space. So that his point is right. You've got to make that argument to the senior leaders to kind of buckle up because it's going to take more time, more money, but in the end, it's going to produce something we need. If you can't make
Yeah.
that argument, it's not going to go anywhere.
No, that's exactly right. Exactly right. So setting expectations internally is critical. So we did ask our audience, Andy, what has gone wrong with the composable commerce approach in B2B commerce that implies something has gone wrong. So we offered the first option, nothing. It's alive and well. Guess how many people picked that one? 14%. Eek. What the other choices? The number one answer to this question was too complicated to implement. 62% of people said that composable commerce is too difficult, too complicated. Other reasons, too hard to explain internally, 14%, and too expensive, 10%. But what shocked me about this poll, Andy, was the number of people who said nothing. The composable commerce model is alive and well. People are very skeptical of this. This is shocking. Was it shocking to you?
It was, yeah. I mean, you only have to look at the two. Nothing that's alive and well is way too low, and the other one, too
Yep.
complicated to implement, is way too high.
Right.
It's, if 2/3 of the people are saying it's too complicated to implement,
Yeah.
that's a problem for people who go to market
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, ecom platforms, you ought to be thinking about these kinds of this kind of data because it implies how receptive people are going to be to your sales pitches.
Well, and
Anyway,
you know what? If that complexity is a differentiator and a long-term sustainable competitive advantage, then it's
true.
worth doing. But to
Right.
the point of a moment ago, is it?
Yeah. Right. Exactly. All right, Andy. We're at like Friday 90 minutes here. We gotta we gotta do our announcements. So, folks, thanks again for joining today. I want you to check out Andy and I would love you to check out our Nexus program. Go to masterb2b.com and take a look at Nexus. This is a service for practitioners where we provide expert advice, bespoke advice exclusively for B2B e-com execs. And it helps you get the right information you need quickly. It's sort of, advisory on demand from serious, significant folks who have spent their careers in B2B e-commerce, your peers, as well as expert advisors we have as a part of our Nexus program. It is a paid program, but check it out. Take a look online at Nexus, B2B, B2B, masterb2b.com, Nexus, and you'll find us. Also want to highlight for folks that our forum is there and continuing to grow and continuing to see good activity. Just saw someone just posted yesterday, Andy, a fantastic VP level job. If you're not on this community, you need to be. If you're a practitioner, it is practitioners only. Conversations happening every day. Go to masterb2b.com, click on forum. And then finally, I want to remind everyone that our Friday 15 is available on podcast format. So take a look on your favorite podcast service, search Master B2B, and you will find us so you can listen to us while you're whatever you do with your time. Pass the time with our wonderful and insightful banter. So thank you all for joining. Andy, any final words on our Friday 90?
The only thing you can say about Northwestern this weekend is it's going to be like in the 80s. So it'll be nice weather for the slaughter.
You talking about the score or the temperature?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's both. I think the temperature indicates probably the score.
All right, folks. We'll see you next week on our next Friday 15. Thanks for joining.